The royal family has gathered in Scotland for their annual summer break at Balmoral.
Every morning at Balmoral, maids must curtsy to empty rooms. Even if the royal just left, they bow to the vacant space. It's a 150-year-old rule that's never been changed. But that's just the beginning. Vacuum cleaners are banned. They scrub carpets on their knees for hours. Some work 18-hour days for less than minimum wage. They can't speak unless spoken to. One leaked review called the management toxic. But there's something darker they discovered. Something that made dozens of them quit overnight. In the summer of 1852, Prince Albert quietly sent $32,000 to buy Balmoral after he saw a rain-soaked ad. He didn't even tell Queen Victoria at first. That amount would be worth about $4.4 million today. Within just a few years, they tore down the old house and built a new granite castle by 1856. Prince Albert even sketched the clock tower himself. More and more land was added until the estate reached over 53,000 acres, larger than San Francisco or Paris. It had mountains, 150 buildings, its own power supply, and a 3-mile railway built in 1866 just to carry royal luggage in secret. Even though Balmoral feels part of Britain, it's not public. It belongs to the royal family personally. So when deer are sold or cottages are rented, the money stays with them. Some people complained in Parliament, but Edward VII called it their inescapable refuge and never gave an inch. The look of the castle is like something from a Scottish fairy tale. It was finished in 1856 with thick white granite that sparkles against the hills. Prince Albert was deeply involved in every part of the design. He made sure the windows opened just right for fresh air and added carvings of all 9 of their children near the door. There are 167 rooms, but the hallways are narrow on purpose, so family members would run into each other more often. Albert thought it would bring everyone closer. The clock tower was based on a German castle and rings in E-flat, so it doesn't scare the ponies. Some people at the time said it looked like a giant cold barn, but that didn't stop other homes from copying it. Within 20 years, 80% of new country homes in Scotland were built in the same style. Queen Victoria later said it smelled like pine and freedom. When the royals come to Balmoral, they don't come alone. In hunting season, nearly 150 workers live and work there. There are gillies, horse handlers, cooks, cleaners, and even a man whose only job is to play the bagpipes every morning at 7 a.m. below the king's window. Everyone signs a lifelong silence promise. If you break it, you're gone. Maids work 18 hours some days, cleaning hundreds of silver pieces and keeping fires burning in over 50 fireplaces. They go through 60 tons of birchwood each season. Meals are simple, royal picnics by the river, where the king still does the dishes. But rules stay strict. Some workers can't speak unless spoken to. Others must live on the land and help kill 1-200 deer every winter. The estate's wages cost over $3 million a year, mostly paid through selling timber and renting cottages to tourists. Every September since 1858, something unusual happens at Balmoral. Workers and royals come together for the Gillies Ball. It starts at 7 p.m., and the king leads the first dance with staff. Even a dishwasher might get to dance with a prince. People say Prince Philip once put gin in the punch to loosen everyone up. Princess Diana said it felt like a prom mixed with Downton Abbey. But the rules never stop. The kind of invitation you get shows your rank. Gold edges for closer staff, plain for others. At midnight, the royals leave, and everyone silently bows. In 1991, a young footman sold a secret about a barefoot dance and got fired. Since then, cameras have been banned. Still, many workers look forward to the ball every year. It's one of the only nights they're allowed to call the king by his first name. Because Balmoral is tucked deep in the mountains and only reachable by a long single road, it was always a good place to keep royal secrets. Queen Victoria's strange bond with her servant John Brown grew here away from watchful eyes. Edward VIII practiced his abdication speech here. When Diana died in 1997, William and Harry were kept away from the news for hours to protect their peace. But not everything stays hidden forever. In 2019, a cleaner leaked photos of the royal children's treehouse, causing the palace to ban photography and cover the windows. Years earlier, a former worker revealed private details like how the Queen Mother drank Dubonnet and how Prince Andrew always needed 28 golf balls. He was paid $90,000 but got sued. Now, even drones can't get close. Sky fences were put up in 2024. Balmoral is quiet, but secrets still find a way out. Long days begin early for the youngest staff. At 6 in the morning, maids head to the oldest kitchen and begin polishing over 200 pieces of silver. Breakfast is served by 8. Then come long walks with heavy tea kettles along cold stone halls to avoid waking the royal dogs. Lunch means peeling 18 kilos of potatoes. Then they switch into clean uniforms and prepare for tea at 4. After that, it's time to clean up muddy boots from the day's hunt. Most nights, they reach their attic beds around 9:45. These are 15-hour shifts. No overtime, just a quiet line in the old manual that says, "Loyalty is its own reward." One former maid said it was like giving your life to a shadow. And no one ever said thank you. Vacuum cleaners were banned. Queen Elizabeth hated the sound of them. So every morning, 2 maids would get down on their knees and push little horsehair brushes across the carpets. Just brushing one hallway took 45 minutes. The dust got so thick they had to rinse their aprons twice a day. In 1990, the head housekeeper said the change added 9 hours of work daily, but pay stayed the same. Staff said their wrists hurt so badly they couldn't eat properly. Still, no one complained out loud. The castle looked perfect on the outside, but inside, quiet pain spread beneath every clean rug. Talking was dangerous. In July 1986, one maid was dusting when she heard Prince Charles whisper to Diana. Another servant hissed at her to act deaf. The next morning, she got a written warning. There was a strict rule. Don't ever register what the royals say. If you do it twice, you're fired, and you lose your $250 end-of-season bonus. Many workers learned to communicate with hand signs, especially during breakfast service. Some said the halls of Balmoral were quieter than a library, not because of respect, but because of fear. Everyone was watching. Every silence meant survival. The pay was not fit for the job. In 1983, the lowest-level housemaid earned $18,000 before tax. That was barely $4,000 more than the average British worker, even though she worked 60 hours a week and lived at the castle full-time. Some areas still had old toilets, so maids carried out chamber pots. It took 3 years to move up to first housemaid, but that only raised the pay to $2,500. Meanwhile, male gamekeepers earned about $26,000. Many women left after just 1 year. Royal historian Patrick Thorncroft later said it created quiet tension that was never spoken, but always felt, like standing in the cold wearing silk gloves. One rule truly shocked new maids. If a royal left a room and a maid entered moments later, she still had to curtsy to the empty space. It was meant to honor the spirit of the royal who had just been there. In 1987, during the Gillies Ball, the staff ended up doing this curtsy 61 times in one evening. Some bruised their knees so badly that bandages were handed out with their serving trays. One maid said it felt like curtsying to ghosts. It was a sign that their dignity mattered less than tradition, and no one ever questioned it. In March 1988, A French magazine printed a story that shook the royal family. It came from a young maid who had worked just 8 weeks at Balmoral the previous summer. She was paid around $10,000, more than she would have earned in 8 years. In return, she shared everything she saw behind those royal walls. She talked about dinner routines, private moments, even which dogs slept near Princess Anne's room. The UK tabloids picked it up within 2 days. Suddenly, millions were reading what was never meant to be shared. One of the most touching stories she told happened in August 1987. During a formal dinner, a guest accidentally drank from the finger bowl, mistaking rose-scented water for soup. It could have been embarrassing, but instead, the Queen and the rest of the royal family quietly copied him. They all sipped the rose water just to make sure he didn't feel alone or ashamed. Staff counted 17 empty bowls after that dinner. That tiny moment said more than 1,000 speeches. It showed a family that, in private, would rather drink perfume than humiliate someone. But not all the stories were sweet. She said that during Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher's 1987 summer visit, things were tense. The Queen, according to the maid, didn't have her stay inside the castle like the other guests. Instead, she was sent to a small cottage far away on the estate. Staff even called it Siberia. The palace denied it immediately, saying Thatcher always stayed at the castle. But people noticed she missed the next morning's grouse hunt. Whether it was just protocol or something more, the tabloids ran wild with it. Two powerful women, locked in cold silence, made for irresistible headlines. When it came to Charles and Diana, the picture was softer. The maid said they seemed like two teenagers in love. She often saw them holding hands when they thought no one was looking. Charles would fetch Diana's coat himself before a picnic. Diana quietly gave tips to the young stable boys, but the sweetness didn't erase the hard truth. Housemaids were earning just $75 a week. Overtime often went unpaid. Breaks were called by a bell, just like in the 1800s. It was kindness in the hallways, but old rules still ran the house. The royal household was furious when the story came out. Within hours of it reaching the public, the palace issued a harsh statement, calling it a gross breach of trust. They launched an internal review, checking all 348 staff members who had worked the previous season. Security rules were changed overnight. New workers had to go through long background checks and sign strict secrecy papers tied to the Official Secrets Act. Everyone understood what that meant. Talk to the press, and your career was over. But the Queen herself was a mystery of contrasts. The maid remembered Christmas of 1990 when she watched Her Majesty carefully save an iron-used wrapping paper and stored them in a tin once used for dog treats. It was wartime thrift in a palace full of jewels. She once saved a lemon slice from her plate, saying it would be perfect for trout the next day. Staff found it both charming and strange. While some admired it, others wished that same frugality extended to their wages. Prince Philip, meanwhile, used dinners as a sort of game. Every evening at 8:15 sharp, he would fire questions at the maids. How many grouse were caught that day? Who had run off with the local postmistress? The maid remembered answering 11 questions in a row in August 1985. To some, it felt like harmless teasing. But to Diana, still early in her marriage, it felt like being watched too closely. She later said those evenings felt more like tests than family dinners. By summer 1991, even the children were part of the palace rhythm. 8-year-old William and 6-year-old Harry began hiding vacuums and making a game of disrupting the staff. Once they hid a cleaner behind an old tapestry, causing a 42-minute search. That same week, they squirted mustard on the ceiling, copying a joke Prince Philip had once played. But underneath the giggles, there was tension. Only 2 days before, Charles and Diana had a long, private conversation about separating. The maid heard it through the walls. The boys were playing, but the castle was holding its breath. When the maid first arrived in May 1987, she was asked to swear an oath, not written, but spoken, promising to protect the family's secrets. They stood in a quiet hall filled with stag heads, looking each other in the eye. But that promise didn't stand forever. Selling her story meant changing her life, and it forced the palace to change too. By 1989, they started making every new worker sign a legal secrecy clause. Even in those tough conditions, the Queen's manners never failed. After every big event, she made sure to thank every member of the night staff by name. But no amount of kindness could warm the freezing attic bedrooms. Until 1994, maids slept in rooms that dropped to 4 degrees at night. Hot water ran for just half an hour in the morning. In August 1992, when the iron fuse blew during a rainstorm, they had to dry sheets over the massive stoves while wearing gloves. Only after a 1995 audit finally pointed out the bad living conditions did Balmoral upgrade the plumbing and hand out duvets. The maid liked to believe her words had something to do with that change. Something strange kept happening behind the walls of Balmoral Castle and the royal estates. It wasn't the usual scandal you read about in tabloids. It was something quieter. Between early 2024 and mid-2025, the gardening team at King Charles's Highgrove estate fell apart. Out of 12 workers, only 1 stayed. The rest walked away. The job looked beautiful from the outside. Carefully trimmed hedges, perfect flower beds, royal tours, but behind that beauty was pressure most people couldn't handle. They worked up to 60 hours a week, sweating over 15 acres of themed gardens visited by 40,000 people each year. They earned around $22,000 a year, which after taxes was just $7.05 an hour, barely better than minimum wage. Things came to a breaking point on July 5, 2025, when one gardener tore his shoulder hauling 180 kilograms of compost alone. He didn't even get proper sick pay. He was forced onto basic benefits of 116s a week. 9 days later, nearly everyone quit together. Internal emails leaked that month showed Charles often left handwritten memos in black ink demanding impossible things, like pulling up 1 weed overnight or replanting 700 flowers before he came back in just 3 days. On July 18th, the palace admitted something was wrong. They quietly brought in a crisis team to fix the damage. But these cracks in royal life weren't new. Way back in January 1983, a young maid named Fiona remembered freezing nights in Balmoral's attic rooms. She and 2 others shared a 12-square-meter space, with thin glass windows that let in the 10°C winds. Their breath frosted the walls as they slept. Heaters weren't allowed. Management said it was a fire risk. In 1987, the staff were promised warmer dormitories by 1990. That never happened. By the end of that decade, over a third of the maids had quit. Interviews from a 1998 university project described rain leaking through broken slate roofs. The maids had to wake at 6 a.m., wearing damp uniforms that gave them chilblains. 2 got pneumonia and were fired for missing work. It wasn't until 1992 that electric heaters were finally installed, after a government warning. But by then, many long-serving maids had already left for better jobs in warm hotels across Inverness. Fast forward to March 9, 2024. A housekeeper posted a review on Indeed, calling Balmoral's management toxic. She said bosses yelled in front of guests, punished maids for missing dust on picture frames, and even docked their break times as punishment. That week, 5 maids quit. Rooms sat dirty until 11 at night. Supervisors locked themselves in their offices while the staff suffered. The review said the average pay was just $10.90 an hour, which was 60 pence less than the real living wage in the UK. Overtime past 48 hours? Not paid. Other ex-workers replied, backing her story. The palace tried to downplay it, but leaked interviews showed that 68% of staff who left said bullying or disrespect was their main reason for quitting. Even speaking out was dangerous. Since 1950, royal employees have had to sign secret agreements that block them from ever sharing what they saw or felt. These were updated again in 2022, and they stay in force forever. Breaking them could mean being sued for 6 figures. But in October 2024, someone leaked anonymous payroll files. The numbers shocked people. A senior royal aide earned $146,000. A maid? Just $19,500. And she had to share a room. That meant the pay gap was over 7 times. That same year, the sovereign grant, money given to the royal family, rose to $85.9 million, up 41% in 10 years. But maid wages barely went up 6%. When one former valet, Paul Burrell, released a book in 2003, he said anyone who tried to speak up got legal letters within 24 hours. The 2024 leak restarted big debates in Parliament. But because royal households don't have to follow freedom of information laws, maids and cleaners still have little power to speak out. These stories echoed earlier betrayals. In 1950, Marion Crawford, the former governess to young Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret, wrote a memoir after 16 years of service. She shared simple stories, how the girls swam in public pools and once waited in line for the underground like ordinary kids. The Queen Mother never spoke to her again. Crawford lost her royal cottage and died in 1988 under a fake name. Not one royal came to her funeral. Then came Paul Burrell's book in 2003. He had once been Diana's closest servant. She called him the only man I can trust. His memoir revealed heated Balmoral arguments and private letters. But before that, in 2002, police raided his home and found 342 royal items. But in a twist, the Queen herself stepped in, saying she remembered talking to him about the items. The case collapsed on November 1, 2002. He was cleared. His book sold over 500,000 copies, and years later he admitted adding fake details to confuse investigators. The year 2024 brought another betrayal. After Princess Kate had surgery in January, someone at the London clinic tried to access her private medical file. The news broke in March. Investigators acted fast. The clinic warned staff they could face criminal charges. 3 workers were under review, and fines could go up to $17.5 million. People saw it as the most serious breach of royal privacy since the phone hacking scandals of the 2000s. Back in 1983, another servant spoke out, Stephen Barry. He had joined royal service at 17 and, by 21, was Prince Charles's personal valet. He laid out the prince's clothes, pressed every kilt, even swapped shoelaces every day. He wrote a book called In Royal Service that came out in May 1983. He revealed that valets made just $6,000 a year, half of what a London bus driver earned, despite being on call all day and night. He was fired within months. He died 3 years later in 1986 from AIDS-related complications. But his honesty exposed something deeper, the quiet class struggle inside Balmoral's walls. Even those who got permission to write still caused waves. Angela Kelly, the Queen's dresser, got the monarch's blessing to publish her book in 2019. The other side of the coin came out that October. It told harmless stories, how she broke in the Queen's shoes herself and once used dish soap to help fasten a brooch. But even that sparked a stir. Some palace insiders said Prince Charles thought her photos were inappropriate. It showed that even with permission, talking about life behind Balmoral's doors was never truly safe. On the morning of August 4, 2025, something strange happened at Balmoral Castle. At exactly 7:30 a.m., the massive gates were locked shut. The official reason was Storm Florus, with winds hitting 90 miles per hour. But the truth was deeper. Almost two-thirds of the room attendants had already walked out the night before. They said they wouldn't sleep on floors anymore, especially not in huts where the roofs were falling apart. Thousands of tourists were turned away. It was the first time Balmoral had closed its doors to the public like this since the 2001 foot-and-mouth crisis. By midday, rain had started pushing through the old windows. Just 2 housekeepers stayed behind, but the trouble had been building for a long time. In 2024, Maids began posting online about what was really going on behind those thick granite walls. Some of them were asked to clean 12 royal suites before lunchtime. Some of those rooms had antique glass chandeliers and historic tartan mirrors that had to be spotless. One maid said if Camilla's room wasn't finished in 55 minutes, she'd lose her lunch break. They were paid just $10.90 an hour. Many of them quit and took hotel jobs instead. Even back in 1865, Queen Victoria had written in her diary that she was always short on housemaids. Some things never change. Meanwhile, King Charles had a dream. Between 2023 and 2025, he expanded the organic gardens and added 30 beehives to Balmoral. He wanted every meal to be carbon neutral. But that dream came with a heavy cost for the gardeners. They weren't allowed to use tractors. Everything had to be done by hand. Rainwater barrels replaced hoses. Each day, workers were making around 90 wheelbarrow trips just to get things done. Since March 2022, almost every senior gardener across the royal estates had quit. Most were earning only minimum wage, even though the king's personal fortune was over $1.1 billion. One man said he had to lift over 200 kilos of compost each day, and it gave him carpal tunnel. The king's handwritten notes, telling them to remove all chemicals by sunrise, were pinned to the potting shed wall like orders from another world. It found that staff were being paid an average of $11.05 per hour. That's 15% less than the national average for hospitality jobs. The whistleblowers said it all came down to a budget rule that capped staff wages at just 7% of estate earnings. But after Queen Elizabeth died, tourism money had jumped by 22%. They could afford to pay more. In fact, experts said it would only cost $187,000 more per year to raise wages to fair levels. That's less than what they spent to resurface the private helipad. But instead of fixing the problem, maids kept quitting. In 2024 and 2025, the staff turnover rate hit 38%, double the usual rate in the industry. The moment that made everything boil over came in June 2023. A young maid, known only by the name Heather Glenn, went on an online gossip forum. She said her request for emergency leave had been denied. Her mother was going into surgery, but she was told she had to stay and starch Princess Kate's linens. She quit that day. Her screenshots showed she had only used 2 out of her 10 leave days that year. The post went viral. Over 11,000 people commented. 2 weeks later, a new job ad quietly appeared online. It was for a room attendant. It offered $10.50 an hour and said they needed someone immediately. The palace said it was a coincidence, but insiders said 5 more maids handed in their notice after that. The managers had no choice. They brought in temporary workers from Aberdeen and paid them $19 an hour, almost double what